Hello, it's the Friday Talkie. So, what have I got to talk about today? I'm going to do what I usually do when I've got nothing original to talk about. I'm going to respond to other people's videos and tags and stuff. And I'm responding again this week to gamebloke, who has asked a question: what machine would you recommend to a collector on a budget? And in that he means on a tight budget. So someone like me then. And I've had quite a few thoughts on this, and there are several machines that I would suggest, and then I'm going to try and narrow it down. And the first one that gamebloke was referring to specifically, and this comes from a conversation he was having with Badly, who's looking into getting an Amiga 500 Plus, and I thought, Amigas, yeah, because Amigas now aren't that cheap. And up until recently I would have said, yeah, Amiga 500s are quite cheap, but even they're not that cheap anymore. But they do offer very good value for money, and you can get software for them really cheaply. So it's like there is an initial outlay, but once you've got past that, you can get loads of software and really cheap. And if you have the appropriate equipment, be it a CD-ROM drive or an SD card reader type thing, something like that you can hook into your Amiga, and you can get stuff like that for some Amigas. Then you can download ADFs and play all the games for free if you're not worried about actually having original discs. And I am finding that Amiga discs, old ones, they do fail because of the actual physical way the discs were written. Makes them a little bit on the unreliable side. But would I suggest a 500 or a 500 Plus? I'll be honest, no I wouldn't. And the reason for that is reliability. In terms of compatibility, your 500s and 500 Pluses and whatnot, you're going to get lots of games that will work on them, where with something like a 1200, some of the earliest games, there are some compatibility issues. There are workarounds, but it all gets technical and a pain in the arse. But the 500s and 500 Pluses, the chips are socketed, which is alright if you need to replace a chip, but it creates reliability problems. It can get when you're running it, the chips can get warm and they can pop out of the sockets. Not a really big deal. You can just open it up and push them back in again. And I have had to do that with my 500. And then you've also got the issue of you can't just plug it straight into a telly. You've got to have a modulator that plugs in the back. And it's just, that thing is, it's ugly and it's awkward because it sticks out of the back. You've got to have an amount of space behind your computer. It's just awkward and cumbersome and a pain in the arse, and I don't like it. So I would actually say an Amiga 600. If you're on a tight budget and you can't afford a 1200 and you want a lot of good compatibility with early software, I'd say get a 600. They're smaller, they lack the numeric keypad, which is a bit of a shame because there are a few games where that is necessary, but not too many. And the chips are soldered straight onto the motherboard. Not good if one of them fails, but you don't get the problem of chips popping out, and you've got a modulator built in. In terms of reliability, I found 600s to be absolutely bloody excellent. If anything on one is going to fail, assuming it hasn't been abused and knocked about and everything, if it's had a good life, the only thing that's likely to fail is the floppy disk drive, and you can get floppy disk drives to stick in them, and it's not a difficult thing to do. You also get the PCMCIA slot, which means you can stick compact flash cards and all kinds of other things, probably SD cards, all sorts of stuff you can bung in there. It's not massively expandable, but if all you want to do is play games, it doesn't need to be. You can stick a hard drive in it, you can stick a bit of a memory upgrade in it, and I think on a budget they're great. And they look nice. So yeah, that would be my first thought, is an Amiga 600, but there are other things I would consider as well. I would consider a Mega Drive. You can pick them up cheap, you can pick them up dirt cheap if you don't mind having a tatty one, and you can get games galore. tons of them, and they are cheap. And you've got reliability. They will take a hammering and still work. I mean, I've got one sits in the loft now, and it's way beat up, and the reset button doesn't work. But for the most part, that just doesn't matter, because you just turn the power off and then back on again. You know, it obviously been owned by a kid, and they beat the hell out of that reset button. But the only time that ever actually mattered was when I plugged a Mega CD into it, and the reset button was used to eject the disc drawer. So I got another one, because in that situation it did cause a problem. But largely, you know, they are fairly bulletproof. Tons and tons and tons of cheap software that's on cartridge, so you haven't really got to worry about the reliability of that either. You might want to use like a cotton bud and some window cleaner to clean up the contacts, and that's it. You know, plug it in, turn it on, it'll work. Brilliant. And the quality of the games is very high. There are some fantastic games on the Mega Drive, and lots of them. And it's kind of, yeah, it's retro, but it's not uber retro. So even, I don't know, teens, 20-somethings might appreciate a Mega Drive where maybe they wouldn't appreciate something older. You know, the Mega Drive games look like, I don't know, a lot of Flash games and things like that are knocking around now, stuff you might find on Facebook. So they're not so retro as to seem silly. Though personally I don't see how any retro game could look silly, but to a younger person they might. Okay, another thought that crossed my mind was the Atari 2600. This is probably as cheap as you can possibly get. You could pick up a 2600 Junior for, well, if you were lucky you could get one for a £5. You might get one for a tenner. You probably shouldn't pay more than 25 quid. And you can pick up cartridges for £1, maybe. You know, there are billions and billions of Atari cartridges on eBay that are just dirt cheap, and a lot of them are god-awful absolute rubbish. And I suppose there is the thing, how cheap do you want to be? How cheap do you want to go? You do get what you pay for, and Ataris are probably as cheap as you can go in terms of the hardware, I think, and the software is kind of there as well, a lot of it. But the thing with the Atari as well is there are also, if you later on come into money and have a bigger budget and want to go for rarer stuff or valuable stuff, there are rare Atari games out there as well, and you could have a massive collection. And there are different models of Atari as well, and things like the Heavy Six are really quite collectible and a bit on the expensive side. So the hell? There was a weird noise just then. I don't know if it was up in the loft or downstairs. Weird stuff happening. Ghosts, whatever. I don't believe in ghosts, but you know. Yeah, so Atari is an option. The other thing I would consider is the Game Boy Advance. And specifically I would say the Game Boy Advance SP, because you then have the advantage of playing Game Boy Advance games, Game Boy Color games and standard Game Boy games all in one little unit, in colour, with, well, if you're really lucky you could get one with a proper backlight, though in the UK you're more likely to get the one with the front light, but nevertheless you can pick them up at a very affordable price, and there is tons of software. And if you're really into your retro, there are the compilations of arcade games on, you know, half a dozen games on a cartridge, stuff like that by Konami and Sega and Capcom. And is there a Capcom one? I can't. Loads of them anyway. Lots and lots of really good games on the Game Boy Advance. Not as many as the Atari, but now the dogs are barking. Excuse me. Sorry about that. We had an intruder. Feline intruder. One of our neighbour's cats with a bell. Came in through the cat flap to eat our cat's cat food. And our dogs can hear it and they know it's not one of our cats, so they go mental. It's fun when it happens in the middle of the night. Where was I? I can't remember. think I've done the, I said about Atari, I said about GBA-SP. Okay. Another one to consider would be the Sinclair Spectrum. You got different models. Personally, I favour the rubber keyboard 48K, but you can get most Spectrums 48K, 48K plus, not so much the 128, they can cost a bit more, and then you've got things like the Plus 2 and the Plus 3. The Plus 3 will cost more, and I wouldn't go for that anyway. I would go for a 48K model, but anyway, Spectrums. I suppose it depends how retro do you want to go, because they are a somewhat limited system, but if you like that kind of thing and the limitations don't bother you, they're brilliant, because hardware wise they're not massively expensive, and then the software, you can get games for them so incredibly cheaply. You know, tapes, £1, cheaper than that maybe. I don't. What's the lowest you can pay on eBay? I don't know. Yeah, just uber cheap software, and you can get stuff to add to them. Joystick, the interfaces. I knew there was a word in there somewhere. And of course you can just download the software, get tap files, convert them to WAVs, and load them up like that, either through like a laptop or put them onto CD or put them onto a tape, whatever. Depends, do you want original software or do you just want to download it and play it for free? Because you can. Yeah, I think they are really good for collecting on the cheap. Commodore 64 is also cheap. As cheap? I'm not so sure. The software, yeah, you can get that uber cheap as well. But the hardware, I think a Commodore 64 you would probably have to pay more. Most of the 8-bit computers, you know, the Beeb, the Beeb would cost you more. Ataris, I would say of the 8-bit computers, the Spectrum is probably the best value. If not the most capable. It certainly isn't the most capable, but I think it is a very, very collectible system for someone on a budget. So, of all of those, and those would be like, that's my short list. But if you said to me, okay, but you can only tell me one, what's it going to be? I know which would be my favourite, but that's not actually the one I would suggest, because I am an Amiga man. I love Amigas, and there are others in there as well that are absolute favourites of mine. But I would actually say the Mega Drive. I think if you're on a really tight budget and you want a wide variety of games, and you want something that's going to be reliable and it's got to last, you know. You don't want to have to pay for repairs, you don't want to have to replace it if it gets knocked about and breaks, or you drop it on the floor, and why would you drop one of them on the floor where you might drop, say, a Game Boy, something like that. I would say the Mega Drive. You've got a massive variety and you've got reliability. Your discs aren't going to break because it's got cartridges. Your disc drive isn't going to break because it hasn't got one. The only choice it leaves you with, do you get a Mark 1 or a Mark 2? Personally, I would go for a Mark 1. They look nicer, and I think the power socket on the back is more sturdy. I've got a Mark 2, and I think the power socket on that is a bit iffy. Never mind, I know the power socket on that is a bit iffy. I don't like it. It has a smaller, it's got a smaller hole, and I find it less reliable. Yeah, Mega Drive, Mark 1, uber cheap, masses of software, very reliable, will last donkey's years and not give trouble. And if you don't hammer the joypad, they should last well as well. And even if you do hammer it, well, you can get spares cheap. So that is my recommendation. Yeah, retro collecting on a budget, get a Mega Drive. Okay, moving on. I've got to edit here because I don't know what I'm talking about next. Okay, another video response. Wow, my hair's a mess. Let's move closer so you can't see it. Yeah, from YTGCnow, which is 888-385, his YouTube gaming community channel. He's done a video. Do you think people make YouTube too much part of their life? I do recommend going along and watching that video. Actually, I recommend going along and watching gamebloke's video as well. I didn't mention that. I will link to their videos down there anyway, as usual. Now, he goes into some detail about how people use YouTube, and there are people who maybe get carried away with it. How they start is not how they continue, or... God, I don't really want to repeat everything that he said. Edit long pause. It's kind of, what do people expect of YouTube? Are they doing it just for the fun, or do they want something more? Do they want the popularity, the fame, which really, unless you're like a Ray William Johnson, Jenna Marbles, whatever, you're not going to be famous. You're just not. Do they want the money? What? Do their motives change? And does it matter? There's the thing. I will agree. I think there are some people who, for them, YouTube takes up a massive, massive, massive part of their life. But I don't think that's always a bad thing. Yeah, you will get the ones, and it's like, as Trouble8385 said, it's often the smaller channels. They come into this, they have an expectation of what they want, they don't get the attention or the success that they want in a short amount of time, because they see larger channels having an amount of success, and they're like, wow, I want that many subs, what do I have to do to get that? And they will do all kinds of crazy things to try and get it. All kinds of attention-seeking tactics, both good and bad, competitions, through to starting controversies and fights and slagging off, and all kinds of stuff can happen, good, bad, whatever. But that frequently doesn't work and isn't a good way to conduct yourself, and these people will do that and kind of burn out and then just get jaded and pissed off and quit in a big flurry of, oh my god, it's so crap, you all suck, you're not following me, I quit. And quickly everyone forgets all about them, because that's not what this is all about. So there are those who, for them, yeah, they are kind of, it's like it means too much to them. But there is another side to it. There are people for whom YouTube is a lifeline, if you like. It might be a massive part of their life, but there may be a very good reason for that. Maybe they have social anxiety, and this is just the most comfortable way for them to socialize. It is socializing. It might not be in real time unless you're doing the live stream thing, but you can meet people, like-minded people, good people, people like yourself. And if you're someone who really doesn't like being around people in the real world, this is heaven sent. It's a godsend. I'm not religious, so I don't know why I use those terms, but you know, they're in common parlance, so I do. It is just, it's a gift to be able to talk to people about subjects in common, and I think that's a really positive thing. And I can understand there will be people who will spend most of their day on YouTube watching what other people are saying, putting up videos of their own, and I really think that's not a bad thing. I think it can be quite healthy if all they were going to be doing otherwise is sitting in a corner feeling miserable, or get up, go to work, come home, watch telly, go to bed, get up, go to work, come home. That's a crap existence. I've lived that existence. I don't anymore. I've sorted my life out, but I wish I'd had YouTube back then. Yeah, so it's a curious one. It is possible. I suppose the thing is, if you have a life already, if you have a social life, if you have a family, if you're married, if you're in a relationship, something like that, then yeah, it would not be good to spend all your time on YouTube and for it to be the be-all and end-all. But it can also facilitate having a life, though I personally wouldn't use it for... you're not likely to find your life partner on YouTube. You might, but I would say it's not a good forum for that kind of thing. But if for whatever reason you just can't get out there into the real world, and for some people that just isn't an option, then I think YouTube is absolutely brilliant. It gives you more of a life than you might have had. I think that answers it. It is swings and roundabouts. It is possible to go in the wrong direction with it, but on the other hand, I think there are circumstances for some people where having it be their whole life might not be such a bad thing. Depends very much on the person and their circumstances, I think. It is an interesting question, and it certainly bears pondering on and thinking about, and I certainly don't think I've covered all aspects of it at all. But, you know, those were my thoughts briefly after watching Trouble 8385's video. That's on his YTGCnow channel, which I do recommend you check out, because he's got more than one channel, and that's where his YouTube gaming community channel show thing is now. Okay, moving on. Another tag response. Is it a tag? Whatever. Video response. Lawn Boys post, 1975. How important were gaming magazines to you back in the day? Link to his original video down there. To me, they were essential. Utterly essential. I was on a budget, so I could not afford... Well, let me start at the start. My first gaming system that worked was the Atari 2600, and games for it were bloody expensive. We're talking £30. I was 14 years old. You don't, in 1983, very often have £30 when you're 14 years old. Was it 83 or 84 by then? Can't remember. Anyway, so if I was going to have a game, have a game bought for me, it had to be a good one. And how were you going to find out that? Well, I had pocket money, so I could buy magazines. And the magazines, well, there was only really one magazine, and that was Computer and Video Games. I bought Computer and Video Games from issue 1, and I bought it for a long while, and then I stopped, and then I started buying it again years later when I got a Mega Drive, I think. Yeah, absolutely essential. And I mean, even when I hit 16, and I got a job. In fact, I got my first job when I was about 15. I was working on weekends in a pub, bottling up. Yeah, so I could afford to buy my own games, but still, I was not going to spend that much money. And it was. I mean, back then, 30 quid was a lot of money. And even when they dropped down to 20 quid, that's still a lot of money. If I was going to spend that much, it had to be good. So I would trust the magazines. And generally, they were fairly accurate. So I was a very, very discerning buyer, which meant at the time I had what I thought and still think was a great collection. I can't remember exactly how many Atari games I got, but it was quite a lot, and they were almost all really good, which was cool. And then I got an Electron, and I think really, did I even manage to Electron user, Acorn user? I can't remember what the magazines were. They kind of stopped selling the magazines for the Electron. By the time I got one, it was pretty much obsolete, and they were selling them off, and I couldn't really find that much information about the games for that. Consequently, I have a lot of pretty crap games for the Electron. I have some very good ones, and a lot of them were on compilations, and it was all potluck, and they kind of were... they were hard to come by for the Electron anyway, so basically I bought anything I could get my hands on and played them all to death, whether they were good, bad or whatever. But I really missed having magazines. I couldn't be discerning with the Electron. And then when I got a Mega Drive, that was it. I was back onto Computer and Video Games, and then Mean Machines, Sega, and I did the same with the SNES and then the Amiga. Masses and masses of magazines, because, I mean, did I spend as much in I suppose, no, I didn't spend as much in magazines as maybe I could have spent buying the games. I probably could have bought a few more games if I'd not been buying all the magazines, but I would have had a lot more crap games. I was a very discerning buyer. Yeah, I would say magazines were absolutely essential up to and including the PS1. And then things started to go a bit... the advertising revenue became so influential, and indeed things like, well, the magazines, it was like your official PlayStation magazine. The independence seemed to go out the window, and the reliability of the reviews seemed to go out of the window. Magazines like Edge still mattered, still were trustworthy. I bought Edge for several years, from the very first issue for several years, and then it kind of crawled up its own arse and became a smug, we're so intelligent, we're above all of you, we're going to use big fancy terms and talk in business jargon and crap, and it just became smug, and I stopped buying it. And it was around that, it was by halfway through the PS1 era, I guess, that I stopped buying the magazines. And by the time the PS2 was out, I don't buy them anymore. I just don't buy magazines at all. Hell, I don't even buy Retro Gamer magazine anymore. Is that a terrible thing? It's just repeating itself. Sorry, but it is, so I don't buy that. No, now, for me, if I want to know, is a game any good, I've got you lot. I get recommendations galore. There are videos galore. It's all on YouTube. Everything I could possibly want to know about gaming is right here. And now, for me, magazines, they are biased. They're all about the money and the advertising revenue, and I frankly don't believe a word they say. And, well, they're obsolete. Yeah, but back in the day, essential. Utterly, utterly would not buy a game unless I had read a good review about it, if I was able to get the magazines. And when I wasn't, well, my gaming suffered. I played some crap. Okay, I was going to do a shout out, but I'm not, because what I thought I was looking at, I was not actually looking at, and something wasn't what I thought it was, and I should pay more attention. Yeah, so no shout out this week. Okay, so what is coming up? I don't know. I'm kind of at a crossroads with the videos I want to make in terms of what system I'm going to do them on, and I think it's actually going to be a mishmash. I've got my Mega Drive out, I've still got my Amiga out, and piles of discs sitting around, and I'm also enjoying throwing in the odd PS2 game as well. I know they're not really retro, but I'm just liking the whole plug it in and play it aspect of it, and yeah, so it's going to be a mishmash. I've got stuff still sitting around that I've been meaning to make videos of for a while. I've still got a couple of N-Gage games that I want to do, and a GBA game that's sitting here. Mishmash, can't be more specific than that. Other stuff happening on other channels. The PlayingAndroidBadly channel is still ticking over. I'm doing about a video a week at the moment. I did a fun one this week. Link down there to my channel if you want to see me playing Android games badly and you're not aware of that channel already. I can't speak. BenwaysWorld is full of driving at the moment, and that's fun. I have got some plans for doing on that channel, like a sit down and talk to the camera thing. I saw some interesting videos that I actually want to kind of respond to on there, because they're not about gaming. God, can you believe it? Yeah. Okay, that's me rambling like an idiot done, I think. Thank you for watching. For fuck's sake! Edit that out.